What is up, my brothers and sisters, my agents of respect? It's your boy Trey Johnson back with another episode of the No Disrespect But podcast. Before we get started, make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, feel free to comment, but as we always say, keep those comments respectful. And man, really excited to have this guest with me today. I have my man Ace, who is one of the great co-hosts of the Running Gun podcast, sports podcast. And when I tell you, man, sports, I mean that in every sense. They cover, all the sports, all the major ones, and even some that you wouldn't even consider major, but they give great insight. One thing I love about their show is they cover HBCU sports, especially HBCU football. So it's always good to have, folks out there in sports media and sports entertainment covering those sports. You can always catch them on YouTube. They're usually going live. So I was a guest on their show before and enjoyed seeing, people being able to react and engage kind of live and asking some questions, give their perspective. So these guys are doing something great. And so, Ace, happy to have you, man. If you don't mind, introduce yourself to the folks.
All right, guys, it is a pleasure to be on this No Disrespect Bud podcast. So, people of respect, shout out y'all. Pleasure from having me on. So I'm on Penalty Talk on YouTube. So if you ever want to check us out, Running Gun Podcast, generally running 8 o'clock on Wednesday Eastern time. So for the central viewers, probably 7 o'clock for y'all. But yeah, we talk HBCU sports, NFL, college football. Saints fan here, so we're gonna talk Saints football with my boy Trey here. We talked about it when he was on my podcast 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So this is gonna be fun, and we're gonna have a blast doing it.
Definitely, man. And speaking of that, as Ace alluded to, we're going to be talking Saints. And kind of when I was on his podcast, we were ranting a little bit, but I don't know about Ace, but I at least thought, over the next few weeks, there might be some good things to think about coming in down the stretch to the bye week. But here we are sitting at 500, 5-5 with the league's easiest schedule in the league's worst division. And so, Ace, man, what went wrong? What's going wrong with the Saints now?
Hmm. You know, from when we talked, I believe we talked after the Jacksonville game. So
Hmm.
they had the Jacksonville game, they got blown out, and then they won the next two and gave people a sort of a false sense of security.
Yeah.
And we us two knew what the issues are with the Saints, and then some people were, at the beginning of the season, believed we were going to go 8-0. Some people
Hmm.
thought we were going to run the table in the conference, be one of the best teams in the conference, and it hasn't gone that way. And at this point, from when we spoke last, the same issues are still there, same ones are present. Can't get
Hmm.
more than one guy going in a game, and when your quarterback tries to throw it short, it's generally behind the best slant runner or second best slant runner. I'll take Devontae over him sometimes.
Hmm.
Because if you ever watched Devontae in Green Bay, Devontae was good, but people always called Mike Slant Man, even though Devontae ran more, which never made sense. But anyways, we're talking with the Saints though. It's like MT's probably got one slant that was actually on his chest, and it was the play he got hurt on against Minnesota. That was the only good slant Mike got the entire season, which was hilarious. And then your wide receiver one, Chris Olave, man, he's had a rough year. We both agree with that, both on and
Yeah.
off the field, right? Since that Green Bay game, it's been tough sledding for him, right?
Right.
Going into this Minnesota game, 0 targets in the first half and one catch for QB1.
Wow.
So that by itself is a problem. And then what we also talked about with the defense before Marshawn got hurt, that was also an issue. Defense was getting gaslit a lot. So, it's been a rough sledding. The team hasn't had consistency at either all three phases of the football because even special teams we had Blake Groupie, he's had his own fair share of struggles. You have a punter who struggled to foot the field for you, and it's just been what I don't want to say what can go wrong will go wrong because we've seen teams look at the Ravens, look at the Bengals, their best players keep getting hurt. And it's not like the Saints had that issue up until this week. They were relatively healthy all season. You got
Hmm.
every single schedule break imaginable that was even feasible, actually, not even imaginable. Like what could go wrong for another team happened to them.
Yeah.
And the two games they won, they did not look convincing in either game. The Indianapolis game and the Chicago game. Because
Mhm.
Chicago should have beat them. Chicago got every single platter. It was given to them on a silver platter, right?
Yeah.
And they were just happened to play a backup quarterback. Same thing in the Indianapolis game. If Anthony Richardson and Justin Fields played either of those games, I fully believe they would have torched this team because you saw it against Joshua Dobbs. They can't
Yeah.
stop a running quarterback. As good as Dennis Allen's defense is, it can't stop running quarterbacks.
That's
So
true. It's been the Achilles heel, and to your point, and look, I wasn't like some of those folks that thought we were going to be, 8-0 in the first 8 games and things like that. I mean, it's easy to, judge games on paper, especially as much as our roster was hyped up, especially with the addition of Derek Carr, which I know we'll get into in a little bit. But honestly, in the first 10, I expected us to maybe be 7-3, 6-4 ish. And honestly, I didn't really expect us to start 2-1. I thought kind of with the AK suspension, I'm a firm believer that if you're without your best player, it's not going to be as easy as one thinks. And to be quite honest, we could have easily been 0-3 in those first 3 games, just granted in how the Tennessee game ended and us barely winning that
Tony
one.
Jones Jr.
Yeah, Tony Jones Jr. going off. So it's like if you really look at those first 3 games, even though we were 2-1, and most people were thinking, oh, we should be 3-0 if Jameis wasn't, in the Green Bay game. I'm putting it all on him. But if we really looked at it, we could have easily been 0-3 because in that first half against Green Bay was actually moving the ball on our defense, but they just couldn't cash in into points and so you start to see what we've been this past month or so in terms of teams, regardless of who the quarterback is, whether it's their starter or the backup, they're pretty much moving at will on the Saints, especially in the first half. And DA's been doing a good job of some second half adjustments, but um, just to kind of think about, for you coming into the season, there were about 2 or 3 things that you were like, okay, this is what I expect to see this season, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent. And based on some of those expectations you had, how would you parlay that into were you right? Were you wrong? Are we still kind of in flux with some of the things that you were looking to see from the Saints in the first, half and then some of the season?
Yeah, I think one of them, I think both of us kind of talked about with Carr being mediocre. I'm gonna start with the slightly
Mm-hmm.
negative side of it first, and then we're gonna talk about the real
Okay.
positive take.
We like that.
I'm gonna be bad news, good news first instead of good news, bad news. I'm gonna flip it up on you, right? So we both agree Carr kind of is the epitome of mid, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they gave a lot of fans certain expectations, right? But we both kind of agree, okay, this is gonna be probably a 10 win team, probably max, somewhere around that range. Your floor is probably a 7 win team, most likely. So
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to be an elite team, but you're not going to be like a bottom out tanking team, right? Where you'll be able to get a top 10 pick or anything like that, right? So that part, I think we both kind of saw coming. And for me, I thought
Mm-hmm.
this season was going to probably start more like a 6-4, like how you were saying. I thought they
Mm-hmm.
would win one more game than what they have, but I wasn't going to be like, oh, this is going to be a world beating team.
Right.
And I think so far as what we've seen, like Carr, he's had his ups and downs, and I kind of knew he wasn't going to be the one who would win you a game. Like if you needed to win a game because of your quarterback, he wasn't going to do it. And I think that also is combined with Pete Carmichael and Dennis Allen are not those
Yeah.
guys. Like I was kind of explaining this on the Run and Gun podcast Tuesday. We did our podcast Tuesday this week.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of said like your coach gives you a X floor, right? That's gonna be your base minimum would be your X, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then there's like that second level is where you can reach, but that's your ceiling with the quarterback. So your head coach will give you a floor, and then your quarterback will give you a second level of what you can potentially be as a team, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
even if your head coach don't got it one game, quarterback can go make a play and win you a game, right? We've
Yeah.
seen it with Kansas City, right? But in the Super Bowl, even Kansas City as a team did not play well that first half in that Super Bowl. And Mahomes went, Andy Reid was not coaching a good game. Mahomes went, he made a 40-yard scramble and he put them right back in that game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is what you expect from top tier guys, right? We've seen it with CJ Stroud this season. And then you with Derek Carr, you're like, and Dennis Allen, it's like, you have the floor. That head coach is not going to win you a lot of games. His career record, I believe, is like 20-43 at this point.
Something like that.
I believe it's something like 20-43. Because Chris Vogel was making the joke saying it's a Blade Runner title at this point.
Wow.
So it's not exactly great with your head coach, right? Last year we saw what the offensive coordinator Pete Carmichael is really about. And the stats this
Mhm.
season are proving my thoughts on Pete not going to be able to win you a whole lot of games.
Yeah.
So he's being ranked 32nd out of 32nd in offensive coordinators this season, and he hasn't lost his job. But Ken Dorsey, who's ranked top 10, lost his job already for the same record. So back on to what Carr is like, he's not going to take those variables that he's given, and he's not going to be
Mhm.
able to supersede those, right? So
Yeah.
you take those things, and I believe that that was going to be the case for the season. So if they were going to win games, it would be because your wide receivers, your running backs, or your defense would go and win the games for you if you're going to win it 6 games, right? So with that, that was what I thought for that didn't happen. Like people thought the other side was going to happen, but I thought this was going to happen kind of thing. But where I take that I kind of believe was going to happen, and it kind of has happened, is like Tyreek Hill, not Tyreek Hill. Let me rephrase it. When Deontay Harris was with the Saints, right? I kind of believe he was
Yeah.
a shorter version of what they could have used Tyreek Hill as, right? But
Yeah.
Kansas City was using Tyreek as that big play kind of guy, take it small yards and go pop it off the
Right.
top of the defense, right? But he was always getting hurt. Like the divisional game against Tampa, he was killing them
Hmm.
return game, killing them on offense. Hurt his neck, he was out. Offense looked stagnant, right?
Right.
You go now to Rashid Shaheed, as you saw against Cincinnati when he his first career game where he actually got significant snaps, right? He went
I was
and he
on the
took
first
the top
one.
off of a defense. He went and showed he could be a playmaker. So I was like, Rashid Shaheed, he can be a guy that is a bigger version of what Deontay Harris was going to be for the Saints before the injuries caught up with him. And I think with Shaheed and what you're seeing this year, he's got better numbers than Devontae Smith even has right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's a big play guy. He can go and he can take a top off. He can make defenses have to respect the deep plays. While Olave, he's getting the deep yards, but he's not being able to complete the passes. Whether his deep ball tracking skills, which were never an issue in Ohio
Mhm.
State, is the issue, I don't know. Or is the chemistry with the quarterback is also the issue, I really do not know. However, you go back now, Shaheed is he's taking defenses off, he's making you respect him, and he's also getting good intermediate and short routes in it. So it's like he's showing he can be a versatile route runner and also
Yeah.
a deep threat. So those were all the things I kind of believed he was going to be a better version of what we were getting from Deontay. So I
Yeah.
was kind of happy to see that going on this season.
Yeah. And honestly, to that though, you had more hope for Rashid than I did. Because I mean, I knew he would be involved in the passing game, but I didn't think he would be as instrumental in the passing game. And honestly, one could argue that he should be utilized even more. I thought they were going to, say, hey, maybe we did that too much with Deontay, and it took away some of his explosive ability as that deep threat and the special teams aspect. So I'm happy to be wrong about that part in terms of what I expected from Shaheed. But man, going in, I kind of mentioned one of my big expectations was what our record would be. You know, I always came into the notion of, okay, we have the league's easiest schedule. You think you have the best quarterback in the division. I mean, you think Carr's not terrible. And knowing how we were able to compete with um, Andy Dalton most of last year, we were able to compete the year before with 4 different starting quarterbacks. You're like, okay, we can make some things shake. And that's kind of why I had us at 7 wins, 3 losses in the first 10, but being 500 is one thing, right? But when you also notice that you have been given injury luck by the football gods where your team is relatively healthy and you're playing backup quarterbacks, you're thinking, okay, like we should be able to manage well. But when you let a guy like Josh Dobbs, who's only been, in Minnesota for a cup of coffee, you let him just do what he wants, in that first half, it's ridiculous. And so that was kind of a disappointment just because of how many breaks we got. Like it would have been one thing if we were the team that got injured and had some crazy injuries. And yeah, some might want to point to Carr getting hurt in the Green Bay game. We definitely can't point to the Minnesota game because we were getting our asses kicked then. But it's kind of like you've been relatively healthy, and especially to your key folks. So why aren't you better? And um, coaching was always something that we identified as an issue. Um, Offensive line play, the inconsistencies, the defensive line play in terms of how they play in terms of generating pressure on just any quarterback, let alone how they're dealing with the new model of NFL quarterback, which is a guy that has some speed, some scrambling ability, a little wiggle to him, as I like to allude to. But 5-5 is just a bit disappointing, especially how we've gotten to 500 football. And again, man, I thought at the very least, Carr is going to be an upgrade over Andy Dalton. Like knowing that Andy Dalton wasn't horrible or bad, but it was just, hey, if we need that throw to move the chains and save a lead, or if we need that throw to get us in field goal range or to execute, and get us some scoring drives, Derek Carr can most certainly do that than old man Andy Dalton. And in some areas, he has been better than Andy Dalton, but not to the tune of paying him $150 million, right? I kind of looked up the stats of what Andy Dalton had last season and obviously where Carr is now. And granted, we're 10 out of 17 games. Andy had 14 starts. So maybe we'll see what Carr has after the next 4 starts, if he even starts. But Andy finished the season with 18 touchdowns and 9 picks. Carr currently has 10 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. Now, he's had a few passes that should have been intercepted, and he's had some fumbles that we were able to recover. So who knows what that turnover number would be at this point. Uh, Last year, we had the 19th ranked offense, and we ranked 16th in pass offense. I think this year we have the 12th ranked offense and you know, or we're the 12th ranked passing yards per game. So we're better, but are we that much better? Not really.
To
And
justify the
then
contract, no.
right, and then look at this. This is the one that really killed me. Andy Dalton's red zone or our red zone touchdown percentage for Andy Dalton as quarterback. We had a 52% touchdown percentage rate. With Derek Carr, it's at 37.5. Now, granted, he was the worst red zone quarterback in the league last year. He's notoriously been one of the worst throughout his career. So you get that. That's something that to some degree you would expect. But I mean, that's atrocious. That we're not converting these opportunities into touchdowns. And the fact that now nobody really wants to talk about it. But if we want to score in the red zone, you're putting Derek Carr on the sideline and putting Taysom in the game. And so whether it's his running ability, whether it's him being able to find a tight end, one day we're going to find Colin Saunders on one of these routes, one of these days. But it's just the fact that why do we need to remove the most important position in the game to try to score points in the money zone? And so that's been the most alarming. And then people who want to defend Carr all the time, they want to point to our offensive line. Well, our offensive line currently ranks top 10 in quarterbacks sack percentage, which basically means, they're one of the 10 best teams in the quarterback not getting sacked. Last year, we were 17th. So clearly there's been some improvement. You can't blame it all on Penning because Penning didn't play last year. So, and they benched Penning pretty early in this season, right? So what is it? I think part of it is, and to some degree, it was one of the reasons why Dennis Allen said he went with Andy Dalton and not Jameis Winston, was the holding of the ball too long. Andy knew how to get the ball out, and we called him check down Charlie. But shit, Carr takes that to a whole
Check
new
down
level.
Carly.
And what's crazy is he's still getting sacked. You know, we're missing a lot of open plays, deep plays that we can get some yards, get some touchdowns. But then
Shaheed
there's
touchdown where
times,
he fumbled it this week.
right? But then there's times where he just hold on to the ball and it's there, whether it's the deep ball or the check down. And it's like, dude, you were
What he got hurt
expected,
on.
right? But we expected, or I don't want to say we expected, but the
Mm-hmm.
expectation based on what the Saints coaching staff was saying, what most of Saints media outside of Jeff Duncan were saying, you kind of thought you were getting truly a top 10 quarterback who just was in a bad situation in Oakland and Las Vegas, respectively,
Mm-hmm.
and bringing him to New Orleans. Not so much our culture coaching wise, because again, that's built by Sean, right? But more so the talent around him that
Mm-hmm.
he was supposed to elevate some of those things that it's not really the coach's fault. The quarterbacks before him just sucked. Well, he hasn't really done what was told that he would do. And so that's kind of been um, some expectations that are crazy. And honestly, I will tell you, I will end with something good. I will end with something good. I did think the Saints would generate more turnovers this year from a defensive standpoint. I kind of felt like they had to, just because I wasn't too sold on what our offense was going to do, especially at the quarterback position. So you
Mm-hmm.
knew our defense was going to have to not just have that bend
Step
but
up.
don't break mentality, right? But have to actually
Mm-hmm.
take the ball away, give us short fields. And they've been pretty good with that. I mean, but they have
Debo been
12
great.
interceptions already this year, and they had what, seven all of last season.
Mm-hmm.
Paulson Debo, my guy, uh,
He was
leading the
right on
team
that
in
one.
interceptions. So that's been a bright spot. But again, with that lack of pass rush, is it sustainable against the better quarterbacks in the
Yeah.
NFL? Because we saw Trevor Lawrence on one leg just giving us the business. So
Yeah.
you know, when we play some of these top guys, and we have a Jared Goff, we have a Matt Stafford, even though he's kind of dealing with his thing, but still guys
It's
that
gonna
have
be
a name or
ironic.
made a
I
resume for
want to
themselves,
interrupt, but it's
right?
gonna be ironic as hell if Carson Wentz comes in that Rams game and beats us.
I would be pissed off. That's putting it lightly. That's putting it lightly. But if
Hey,
that
remember the last
happens,
time Sean McVay took a quarterback off the street? He went and beat Derek Carr. I'm trying to say with a straight face, but I
why you
can't.
reminded me of that? Why you reminding me of that? See, well, well, man, look, I want us to be better, especially defensively. I think it's the team's calling card. I mean, they can say whatever they want
Mm-hmm.
about Derek Carr and what he was supposed to bring, but I think we know now at 5-5 that you're going to need your defense to be damn near perfect if you want to make the playoffs this season. And so what they've kind of been, I think, for the last 5 games, they've allowed 20 points or more in the first half. And the only reason why it's not 5 games in a row is because I can't remember what team it was. Maybe it was Indy missed a field goal, and that's why. But
Chicago. Chicago
Chicago,
had
right?
17.
Carl, yeah. So I know it was one team missed a field goal before halftime. So that's the only reason why you haven't given 5 straight games, giving up 20 points or more in the first half. But all is not lost. Me and Ace, we aren't going to give a pity party the whole episode. Now comes the good part. 7 games left in the regular season. We don't even want to talk about playoffs right now. I don't want to talk about
Mm-mm.
that right now. You know,
They should not win that division.
what can we expect? What do you want? What do you want to see, Ace? The next 7 games for the New
Hmm.
Orleans Saints.
All right, so you want the truth or the optimistic?
You know what? Give me both. Give me both.
All right, let's start with the optimistic because the truth's gonna get a
Okay.
few mess. So let me start with the optimistic, right? So optimistically, I want to see QB1 and wide receiver one get their connection going and
Mhm.
get more than 50 yards a game and actually have a connection somewhat looking like an NFL quarterback and wide receiver relationship, right? Especially with
Yeah.
Mike going to be out for significant time, as they've said. Second, I think the defense gets their act going against Atlanta. They're going to struggle
Mhm.
against Detroit, but then they have the Panthers, Giants, Rams, Bucks, Falcons. Rest of the season, I believe they'll be a top 10 defense for sure, guaranteed. After that Lions game. And third on the optimistic chart, I think we're going to see once Kendrick gets back, I think the running game will look somewhat competent. Because
Mhm.
Kendrick, I want to see more of him because like he's made some big plays. It's just the health has not
Mhm.
been what has been left to be desired. Let's just leave
Right.
it like that, right? Because some of them are kind of
Mhm.
fluky injuries.
Yeah,
I
and I
can't
want to
say too
pause you
much
on
on it.
that real quick because that's exactly what happened at TCU for him. Like he was on a tear, and like the most fluke as injury is what knocked him out of playing in the national championship. So to that point, let's hope that's not a trend. But sorry to interrupt, but yeah.
Now, that's those are the three optimistic ones. Now for the truth
Okay.
side, I do. not want them to win this division.
Okay.
I'll
Okay.
be dead honest. I really hope I don't think it happens. I think they win the division, but like I
Hmm.
really do not expect them to, in the
Hmm.
sense that if they win, there's gonna be a there's gonna give DA a way out and Derek Carr a way out. And that is just signing up to be mediocre for the next 5 years if you do that. That will
Hmm.
be a decision, especially with this quarterback class, that will
Yep.
set a team back. So, with that being said, like the Falcons, they beat the Falcons the last 5 games, I believe, in a row. So there's a chance it's
Yep.
always six. But then again, Taylor Heineke, he could just pull a magic thing out of his, you know, pull a magic
But he
hat out
might
of his
not
ass.
play. He might not play. He has a hamstring injury, so it might be Desmond Ritter.
Mm,
I agree.
okay, well then Desmond Ritter can run, so we're screwed anyway. So, well, at that point, yeah. And then Amon Ra is gonna torch the Saints. I already know that's coming. The Panthers are defense is terrible. Giants are terrible. So I think they beat those
Yep.
two teams. The Rams, you never know. Like they still got Cup and Nakua, so and Marshawn's
Mhm.
probably not playing the rest of the season, which
Yeah.
I think is gonna be significant. I want to see what they do with Alante if they move him outside. That could help, but I
I
don't think
think so.
Adam is gonna be able to last the rest of the season outside. And then the
Hmm.
Bucks, Todd Bowles owns Dennis Allen. It's a sad fact. As bad as Todd Bowles has been as a head coach, he just owns him. So there's that, and then you got the Falcons again the rest of the season. So like I don't want them to give Dennis Allen a way out, but with the way the schedule is breaking for them, they probably will.
Hmm.
So that's just the truth and what I think should be and how I feel on the rest of the season. But yeah.
And look, I just in good conscience, I can't like want to lose. If anything, in the next 7 games, I don't care if we go in 2-5 with those 2 wins being against the Falcons. I'll die happy. I'll live with that.
Hey, that
If
happened, that'll be fine too.
if that's all that happens, but I to your point, I don't know if this team could lose out on purpose if they tried their
Mm-mm.
hardest. I mean, granted, we got 5 turnovers against the Bears, tried our hardest to lose that game, and just could not lose it, right? So, and honestly, this Minnesota game, it was just kind of like you get back in the game and then you go back to being crazy again and losing it. So it'll be hard. So I don't see us kind of losing out in terms of our playoff positioning. And I just think
Mm-hmm.
the the Falcons, well, not so much the Falcons, but the Bucks are kind of in a position that we could find ourselves in next season, where they're in the first place schedule, right? So that's kind of where I'm like, even if we're bad, they're probably going to lose games until to better teams that we luckily don't have to play with this week's schedule. I can see the Falcons doing the same. We don't really have to worry about the Panthers right now or at all this season. So we just might win by default. But Jonah Barnes, he was on a podcast recently. He said something really good in terms of it's going to be how you make the playoffs. Like if it's just a matter of you're making it because we suck, or our division sucks and our schedule sucks, you hope and pray that our front office sees it for what it is and is like, this team needs some new direction, right? We've seen 10 coaches that have finished the season 10-6. We've seen coaches that have finished the season 14-2 and made it to the AFC Championship game get canned. So why would Dennis Allen be above that? I have no idea, but
Because
we shall
ownership's
see.
in for the vibes.
We shall see. But some of the things I'm looking forward to or I can see kind of playing out these next 7 games, and I picked 3 as well. I want to see coming out of this bye if we get a change in play calling. I know Dennis Allen said he doesn't foresee any staff changes and things like that, but you mentioned a stat earlier with Pete Carmichael being 32nd out of 32nd offensive coordinators. And you had a guy, top 10 in Ken Dorsey, who gets fired. Why are we beating this dead horse of having Pete Carmichael call plays when he didn't even want the job to begin with? I just think, and Dennis Allen has had this, been a thing before in terms of you have an opportunity to make a change. Are you going to make a change, Dennis? Oh, well, no, I'm not going to make it this time. Well, how many times are you going to allow change not to be had? Because you won't be in that position much longer if you don't make the necessary steps. Now, to Pete Carmichael's defense, when people are sending screenshots of wide receivers running open downfield, well, when Dennis tries to call him in the office, he's going to show that screenshot, be like, nah, motherfucker, I called a beautiful play. Your guy isn't executing. So, maybe that's Pete Carmichael's saving grace right now, because I will say, you know,
Bruh.
that from that Jacksonville game on, you've seen some good things in terms of play design that just haven't been
Mm.
executed.
Wide receiver
So,
one wide open in the middle of the field. And what
so
happened?
so who knows? So who knows? So maybe that might be Peter Carmichael's saving grace. But man, I would love to see Ronald Curry get a shot, just because
Mm-hmm.
he's one of the up and coming play callers, right? And so you want to see if you have, again, you want to see if you have a guy in the building in house. I
Mm-hmm.
know they love that continuity shit. Let's see if you have a guy
Keep
that can
doing what
take
you're doing.
over. So let's see. I mean, he's clearly been a vocal leader. He's been a guy that's not afraid to speak up to the players and challenge them and hold them accountable. Maybe give the guy a shot, because if you don't give him a shot, I can almost guarantee Ronald Curry will be somebody's offensive coordinator next season. And I would pray that we're not having these same discussions that we're having about Eric Bieniemy, where it's like, you see what the hell he's doing with Sam Howell. Imagine if this guy was our head
Leading the
coach,
league in
you know?
passing yards.
So you don't want Ronald Curry to be just another guy you let out of the building that makes you look bad as an organization. So let's start there. Then again, you want to know, is it Derek Carr? Is it the players? Or is it the play call? Like, you have to have some type of knowledge and some type of accurate evaluation as an organization of what's wrong with this, right? So that's kind of where I hope in the next 7 games, maybe out of this bye week, you see Ronald Curry have some input in play calling. They might
Yeah.
not take it all away from Pete, but he might have some input. We'll see where it goes. Also, this pass rush defense. Peyton Turner's supposed to be coming back soon. I think he's coming back after the bye. You spent the first round pick on him. Is Are we going to get a more consistent pass rush down the stretch? Cam Jordan's known for that, being ghost the first 12 games of the season, and then gets the
Going
fountain of
crazy.
youth and goes off, pads those stats. You know,
Especially against the Falcons.
Right. So are we going to get that pass rush back? I mean, I can tell you right now, we are currently 28th in sack percentage, and 29th in sacks per game. Um,
The
you
Saints
know,
pass rush is so bad that they have a first round pick getting double teamed every play.
yeah. And look, Carl Granderson, he's been a fresher breath air, but to a degree, he's not as consistent. Brazil's been
He's not an
been
alpha
great.
pass rusher.
Right. Brazil's been great. Brazil's been great, but it's almost as if the only sacks we're getting are coverage sacks. And that was something I've
Mm-hmm.
alluded to all off season of, you can't live off of your coverage having to be perfect every time for you to get to the quarterback. And then there's been times where we've gotten to the quarterback and haven't been able to corral them, especially if they can move. It took us blitzing.
Containment is rough.
Yeah, it took us blitzing Josh Dobbs to really get him on the ground. Keep in mind, Demario Davis on one leg right now is second on the team in sacks, so he's right behind Carl Granderson for the team lead in sacks. So maybe having Peyton Turner, who was looking kind of good before he messed up his toe. Let's see if he brings a spark. Um, Isaiah Foskey showed some flashes when he gets back from, and it's crazy. He got hurt on kickoff return. Why you have the edge rusher on kickoff return is
Yeah.
beyond me. But I mean, I guess it's also why you have Zach Bond covering running backs and tight ends. But maybe when he gets back healthy, maybe he can get on the field a little bit more, provide some spark. But the Saints are going to have to provide something. And I swear to God, if another person tells me about run defense, which we are 18th in the National Football League in run defense right now, I don't give a damn, because you're not stopping the run right now.
Stopping.
So might as well get some guys that can go get the quarterback. That's the least you can do. Um, and last thing, but definitely not least, is probably the biggest thing for me. You have to look at quarterback. I don't care how much money you've invested into Derek Carr. We understand in the National Football League, if you want to get out of a deal, you can get out of a deal. And at 5-5, with the league's easiest schedule in the league's worst division in any conference, he's a 500 quarterback, and that's just not good enough.
10 touchdowns is inexcusable though.
Right. And it's not
Justin Fields has played 4 less games and still has more than him.
yeah, and it's not similar to a Lamar Jackson, who when they get in the red zone, as you saw last night, look, we can run the ball now without having to utilize Lamar. So we're just gonna
Mm-hmm.
give our running
Gus
backs the
Edwards,
ball.
finish it.
So it's kind of how you got to 10 touchdowns. Like we're not executing in the money zone. It's not as if our running backs are taking all the touches or the touchdown opportunities from Derek Carr. He's just not hitting the plays.
Converting.
And honestly, at this point, Taysom has to be our red zone quarterback. So, that limits his
Mm-hmm.
opportunities. But speaking of Taysom, I mean, our offense looks fine when he's on the field. And again, he's more of look, I wouldn't trust him to pass the ball. I trust myself to pass the ball more than I trust Taysom Hill to pass the ball. Okay. And I'm no quarterback. But I know one thing Taysom's going to do. He's going to take that read. If he doesn't see it, he's gone. And that's kind of what we need, especially with how crazy our offensive line can be at times. You may need a guy that can move around. So if we came a few weeks later and said, okay, Taysom's going to be the guy to finish the season, I wouldn't mind. Guess what? He has a pretty good winning percentage. He knows how to give Michael Thomas the ball. That's for damn sure. And again, he can run. He can get your offensive line out of trouble with his running ability. I can talk about Jameis. I think, honestly, between him and Carr, I think Jameis is the better of the two. And if people want to deny that and think you're trying to be a stan or whatever it might be, I mean, just look at it. Just look at what a healthy Jameis was able to do with the wide receiver core we had and what Derek Carr is doing with the wide receiver core we have now. And it's just night and day. And the way he was able to move the ball against Minnesota,
Mm-hmm.
when they know you want to pass the ball, when their pass rushers
Exactly.
are foaming at the mouth, and you know how our offensive line is, and to have that guy that has that confidence to make the plays, that's what the Saints need right now. I think Saints fans got used to Drew Brees, and when he was limited in his passing ability and trying to get the ball out quick and trying to get it to the running backs and tight ends, that's not what this offense is. Every now and then you'll see somebody show highlights. I saw the highlights of the game that the Saints played against the Giants, where Eli and Drew were duking it out. Drew wasn't throwing damn checkdowns. He was getting the ball downfield, sometimes in double and triple
Mm-hmm.
coverage, because you have to have a guy that's willing to be aggressive in
You have to
this
trust
offense.
the wide receivers
Right.
and your weapons.
Right. And let those guys make plays. That's how a
And
Colston can end up, leading the team, being the franchise leader in touchdowns until AK comes along, because you give guys opportunities. Is how Jimmy Graham can become one of the best
mm-hmm.
tight ends of all time, because you give guys opportunities to make plays. Speaking of tight end position, where the hell is Juwan Johnson? We thought this guy was going
Yeah.
to have a career year, right? Tight ends aren't even being utilized.
Nope.
So, you know, I'm
And
fine if you
Carr's
take Jameis.
calling number was his connection with Darren Waller. He can get tight ends involved, guys.
Right,
Fabian Moreau, you're here, or not Fabian Moreau,
right.
Foster Moreau, you're here because you have
Possible.
a connection with Carr.
And
You're not
so
getting
that's kind
involved.
of yeah, and that's kind of what we thought we were getting, and we're not getting that. And so, like I said, I think James is the better of the two quarterbacks. I get the salary line, but here's the thing: the Saints could have let James go. It would have been financially responsible to let him go and beneficial to let him go, because it would have been very beneficial for our cap. But you didn't.
I got three
And
things now. You're making me have three things instead of two.
yeah,
You
and
keeping
I'll
me
let you
having.
close with those three. But I would say one would argue that there's some dissension in the House of Saints where Mickey still thinks, look, I can go with this guy, but I'm just gonna kind of do whatever you want, Dennis. I'll give you the guy the money or whatever. But if push
Mm-hmm.
comes to shove, if my guy comes in and shows out, that's your ass. But last but not least, when it comes to the quarterback position, and look, if you don't understand it now, Ace, and I don't mean any disrespect, but I'm out of the car business. I'm like, you gotta let me out of the car at this point. And so I'm open to seeing Jake Hayne. You traded up in last year's draft to get him in the fourth round out of Fresno State. Guy started at Washington, transferred out to Fresno State, was a pretty good quarterback. Honestly, maybe would have gotten drafted a year earlier if not for getting injured. Um, we've been talking about next offseason, we're getting a quarterback in the draft. Well, why not? If that's your plan anyway, right? Why not see if this fourth round pick is something, if he has something where shit, he might be the franchise quarterback. Part of me is scared that we might end up in the Minshew Jags thing where they gave Blake Bortles, they signed him to the big contract. He was hot dog shit. They put Gardner Minshew in. He does well as a rookie, and so they don't draft a quarterback that next draft. They give it to Gardner Minshew, and then he turns out that this guy actually sucks too and should be a backup. And luckily they look into Trevor Lawrence, right? But I don't really want that to be us, especially with how great this 2024 quarterback class is coming. But I at least want to see if Jake Hayner, what can he do with Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, the starting offensive line, Alvin Kamara. It's starting to kind of get to that point where you might want to give the young guy a shot and see if he's at least someone you want to keep in the building. So that's kind of my things I'm looking for the next 7 games. You said you had 3 things. I'm gonna let you close it out. Talk to me.
Well, all right. I already forgot the first one, but anyway, we're gonna start with Hayner then, since you mentioned him. Okay, noodle arms, juicer boy. I guess you could give him a shot, but I don't think he's gonna be able to do much with it, to be honest. Especially with how he got tunnel vision so bad in the preseason
Yeah,
with the force
yeah,
feeding of crawls. So I don't think that's not something you can get out of as a
yeah.
quarterback. So I don't know about that one. And then second, I can't believe it took 10 weeks for A.T. Perry to get snaps, especially when he couldn't get snaps over Keith Kirkwood. I think that one should have been a glaring issue in terms of coaching where you couldn't get him on the field at all,
Mhm.
especially with his jump ball ability as we saw in the red zone with Jameis and the wild attempt that he did, where he going all the way across and then throwing
Say
that
the least.
missile to him. Especially with I think the difference between Jameis and Carr, that's kind of point three, but I'm gonna mix it with point two, is Carr cannot throw a fade route for his life. I think
Mm-mm.
that we knew it's an issue, and I think Jameis, he's much better at putting a ball where it needs to be in the red zone for fade routes, which is something
Yeah,
Carr can't do. And I
yeah.
think that's why, like, especially when you have big body receivers like Perry, like Thomas, even Chris Olave can go get a jump ball if you throw it in a catchable area.
Right,
Not like in
right.
that Jacksonville game at the end of the game where he threw it on the inside instead of outside, where Olave was expecting it to go on the outside since he had outside leverage and somebody threw it on the inside for the inside leverage and it got broken up. Or the Texans game where Thomas was expecting outside, he just threw a duck on the inside too. So those are 2 points for that. And then between the difference of Carr and Jameis, as where you say Jameis is better, is like I don't think it's much of who's better. I think both aren't the answer. I think we both know that. But
Mhm.
Mickey keeping Jameis for that contract that he gave him, and also there's not many quarterbacks where a team gets his replacement and also keeps him.
Yeah,
Like you don't see teams don't ever do that,
that doesn't
which
happen
I
at all.
think said a lot on what where you say the discourse is between or is it discourse? Right? I think is the right word for it. Where
Yeah,
it's they're not on the same page between management and coaching staff
right.
for Mickey and Allen. So there's that, and then also Jameis, his offense is more of a running gun type offense. No play on
Mhm.
what my podcast name is, but his it is going and getting it deep. He's more of a gunslinger than he is a rhythm, short, intermediate passing quarterback. And then they say Carr is supposed to fit the offense better, and yet they
Mhm.
don't run the short, intermediate passing game. Like you don't ever see a third down. You want to get an intermediate pass? No, it's four verticals down the field. And sure, some of the guys are open on those plays. And quarterback checks it down instead, or he doesn't check it down at all and he gets sacked and he fumbles it. The play before he got hurt.
Yeah.
And you don't get your wide receiver one in target in the first half. Mike Thomas consistently throughout the season before he got hurt. He would get a couple passes in the first quarter, nothing in the second and third quarter, and then he might get a straight pass or two in the third, in the fourth, I mean.
Mhm.
And that's happened every game. It's like you can't. The quarterback and coaching staff has not been able to get, no matter who's the quarterback. I don't think.
Mhm.
Well, the Jameis that Jameis game against Green Bay, I'm like, my brain's going a little scatterbrain here, but the Jameis game against Green Bay, he was getting into Olave, and MT was just one pass. Oh, MT slipped on the comeback route, and it got deflected and broken up. And the other one, I believe, Olave, I believe I think he slipped also, and he was trying to break it in, and he mistimed it with Jameis, and the ball went over to his head, or
Mhm.
somebody slipped or whatever. And then you had also same put multiple plays where Jameis threw the ball and both Thomas and Olave were in the same spot. And
Right.
people said, "Oh, that's Jameis not getting the communication right between the wide receivers." And then we saw it the next week against the Bucks and in the Texans game where wide receiver are in the same position in the similar areas of the field
Right.
and not spacing properly. So it's a multitude of issues and not just one to blame. But yeah, that's it.
Well, my agents of respect, man. We enjoyed having my man Ace on here talking Saints football. And at the end of the day, you just really want what's best for the team. And it might be different things, you know. For Ace, it's lose all the damn games, let Dennis
Not
Allen and
lose all the games, but
Michael and all
not
them be
not win the
fired.
division
Right. And let them be
long
fired,
term.
let them ride off into the sunset of hell. And let's get some let's get some new blood, into the building, whether that be, head coach, offensive coordinator, um, obviously the quarterback position. But look, we'll see. At some point, Mickey Loomis alluded to this. Your character is going to show these next 7 games. I would say that the character has already been shown. And I don't expect much different. I think we're going to get the hot and cold from all three, areas of our team: offense, defense, and special teams. The only thing you can hope is that the three areas of your opponent just sucks just a little bit more than you, to make the difference in the win or loss column. But we've been hoping for a while, and so you know, this is the life of a Saints fan. You have all the best intentions, all the best optimism, but at the end of the day, what they put on the field is what they put on the field. But man, y'all make sure to follow my man Ace and the Running Gun podcast streaming Wednesday nights. I got that right?
Wednesday nights.
Streaming,
Oh,
streaming
I should
Wednesday
have labeled
nights.
myself "He Don't Miss VJ." People would have recognized me more than Ace. Hold on,
And
before
also
we
make
close
sure
it
y'all
out, let me
follow
deal
them.
with
Yeah. Also make sure y'all follow them on Twitter at Penalty Talk. So really, really group of good guys talking great things. Happy to have you. Happy to be, always meet members of Who Dat Nation and a family and the podcast family. But as we end this show, as we always say, if there's anything that was said that offended you, it's a good thing. It's an opportunity for us to learn. It's an opportunity for you to teach us. I don't know about Ace, but all I ask is that you keep it respectful. Peace.